More of this. CBC's Katerina Georgieva joins us now live. Kat, what more did he tell you today?
Well, Chris, David Mouche says that this should have already happened, and in fact, he says it's already too late. He wishes that it had been declared on Friday. Now, both of the ICUs at both of the hospitals are at full capacity, and an ICU doctor who I spoke with says that he was on call this past week. He says it was the busiest week he's had in more than a decade.
Our situation is dire in Windsor right now. It couldn't be more serious. I would be very supportive of anything that drops the COVID that we're seeing in the hospital. And if a lockdown will do that, it will save lives. There's no question it will save, family members.
He says every COVID bed has an impact downstream, potentially halting elective procedures like biopsies and other important surgeries. The hospital's CEO says a lockdown should have already happened, and it's already too late.
We truly need to move into gray, and sooner rather than later.
Usually the announcement comes from the province, announced on a Friday and starts the Monday. Mouche says instead it should happen immediately without the couple of days' notice, especially with Christmas around the corner.
Our healthcare system cannot tolerate 48 hours of super spreader events, because what's going to happen is 2 weeks from now, that is when the repercussions are going to be felt on our already stressed healthcare system, and it's going to be devastating.
The health unit says our local numbers right now would justify a lockdown. Just take a look at how Windsor's rate of the virus on the third line compares to Peel and Toronto. The medical officer of health had said before he wanted to see if the red zone would have an impact before going into a lockdown. But today, he says, our case counts are not changing. As the possibility looms, it has some businesses fearful.
Lockdown, I think, is the worst thing what can happen to our area. We are very well aware of the virus. By now, we are educated. We know how to prevent and protect ourselves. Like, what I'm worried the most, not only because December is one of the best months for any small businesses, like financially, but for mental health. December is the worst month for people who are alone.
A local psychologist says a lockdown would be difficult for people, but that it's important to shift the focus from individual risk to the collective good.
That requires distancing a little bit for just what's good for me, what do I need, what are my rights, and moving on a little bit more to what is my moral obligation to my community.
The health unit said today that the public should be prepared for a lockdown should it come to that, and that's both businesses and members of the community. And I asked Jarry about that. What should people do to mentally prepare and be ready if a lockdown should occur? And she said it comes down to protecting both your physical and your mental health. So that means getting a good amount of sleep, eating well, and exercising. Chris.
Thanks, Kat. The CBC's Katerina Georgieva live tonight. Now, that ICU doctor that you heard from there, we're going to hear more from him about what it's like in the ICU here in Windsor these days and how he'd like to see the public taking the virus more seriously. That's coming up in just a few moments. A lot of talk about the numbers in that story. Let's take a look at them here now. 57 more people with COVID-19 today in Windsor, Essex, according to the daily update. There's now 491 people dealing with an active case of COVID-19 in Windsor, Essex. Another person has died after testing positive for COVID-19. She's in her 70s. 84 people have died in Windsor, Essex. 8 have died of the virus in the last 3 weeks alone. There's 17 active outbreaks that public health is tracking right now. 3 of those are at schools. FW Bagley is going to start to reopen tomorrow. It'll be a staggered approach. But today, a new outbreak was declared at General Brock Public School. That happened this morning. 2 students have tested positive there. The school is open. The cohort they were part of has been sent home. And tonight, the public board is going to vote on a new mask mandate, deciding if students in kindergarten to grade 3 must wear masks. We're following that tonight. We'll keep you updated here and online as well. Large-scale vaccinations against COVID-19 are underway in the United Kingdom. About 50 hospitals across the country started administering the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine today. Cindy Palm has the details.
It's an early birthday present for Margaret Keenan, who turns 91 next week. The grandmother in central England got the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine early this morning and became the first person in the world outside of a clinical trial to receive that specific vaccine.
I wasn't nervous at all. It was really good, yeah.
All across the country, the elderly are getting vaccinated in what the UK is calling V-Day. The recipients will have to come back in a few weeks, as the Pfizer vaccine requires 2 shots to be effective. The first doses of the vaccine will be given to long-term care residents and workers, some healthcare workers, and people over 80, including 81-year-old William Shakespeare.
The start of changing our lives and our lifestyle.
Shakespeare's niece said on Twitter his wife, children, and grandchildren hadn't been able to visit him. This vaccine rollout is being hailed as a key moment in the fight against COVID-19, according to UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who got emotional during an interview today.
You're quite emotional by that.
Well, it's just, it's been such a tough year for so many people, and there's William Shakespeare putting it so simply for everybody that, we can get on with our lives.
The UK has ordered enough of the Pfizer vaccine to immunize a third of the population and has orders for other vaccines that still need regulatory approval. There are concerns people will not be comfortable getting the vaccine because of how quickly it was developed.
There's a lot of stigma around people not wanting it for that. There's that reason, but just take the vaccine and carry on.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited a hospital today, urging people to get the shot.
There are those, obviously, who feel that a vaccine is something they object to politically or for ideological reasons or for medical reasons. I think they're totally wrong.
Boris Johnson is urging caution as the rollout will take time. Social distancing will continue to be in place. As for when life can return to normal, British Health Secretary Matt Hancock says he hopes that will begin happening in the spring. Cindy Palm for CBC News, London.
And back here in Windsor, the medical officer of health says the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine, it should be regionalized, and he wants regions like ours to get priority. That's because of our close proximity to the border. But as Dale Molnar found out, that may sound simpler than it is.
I hope that Windsor Essex will be a priority for this government to roll out the vaccine in the region to protect our region.
Part of the rationale for that is a large number of cross-border workers here, particularly in the healthcare field. An epidemiologist from Ryerson University agrees high-risk individuals should be first, but it will be difficult to decide who that will be.
Everybody is saying, well, I should be first because of, and another group saying, well, I should be first because of. We're going to see this sort of squabbling in line here. So the risk-based decision has to be based on where it's going to save more lives, save more illness, and especially saving the health system from imminent collapse, which is just on the verge of doing in many communities right now.
But Bill Anderson with the Cross Border Institute doesn't see why this area should get priority.
I don't see any clear reason why a cross-border worker should be prioritized for the vaccine, but I do think that cross-border workers should be given the opportunity to get testing, and that should help them cross the border.
This consultant in the healthcare field in Michigan says Canadian frontline healthcare workers in Michigan will get the vaccine far sooner than they will here in Canada anyway, but it's not clear whether they'll be mandated.
I wouldn't be surprised if down the road that is something that becomes mandated. Whether I worked in Canada or here in the United States, any employer I work for in healthcare has mandated things like getting the flu shot.
And being forced to get the vaccine either by employers or by U.S. border officials is something that worries one trucker we talked to.
I'm concerned that they will restrict me from crossing the border if I don't take the vaccine. Personally, I don't want the vaccine.
Bill Anderson says so far the two countries haven't come up with a clear consensus on how someone will prove they got the vaccine anyway. 85,000 doses are expected to be available in Ontario this month and distributed on a per capita basis. Residents and staff in places such as long-term care homes will be first in line, as long as they're in a red zone, like here in Windsor. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Police in LaSalle are looking for a suspect after a man was shot last night. Officials say the victim opened the front door of this house on Eastbourne Avenue and was met by a person who immediately opened fire. The shooting happened around 8 o'clock. The victim's injuries do not appear to be life-threatening. Police say the victim's not cooperating in the investigation and that investigators are working to obtain a description of the suspect involved. Police believe that this is a targeted incident and that there is no threat to public safety. With hospitals near capacity and the number of COVID patients in the ICU rising, frontline medical staff are close to the breaking point. Tonight, we've been hearing from an ICU doctor who says the situation's dire. He's sharing his frustrations, wishing that the public would take the warnings seriously, saying it doesn't have to be this way. Here's more.
Now we've got tremendous amounts of critically ill COVID patients pouring into the hospital for what is really, in my mind, a somewhat, at least partially preventable pandemic. If people socially distant, stay at home as much as possible, and wear a mask and wash their hands, there's no reason to see these kind of numbers right now. So it's tragic. There's just only so much that we can do, that one person or two people, there's only so many patients we can take care of. There's only so much of us to go around. And if we're running at 100%, 110%, 120% capacity, the system ultimately will grind to a halt. The truth is, I don't really have time to be frustrated. When we're working on call, I really don't have any breathing room to think about anything except the patients, and the staff that I'm trying to help right in front of me. When the day's over or the week on call stops and I go out, I leave the hospital. By go out, I mean, when I leave the hospital, it's frustrating to see people that aren't wearing masks, that are getting together perhaps for things that aren't absolutely critical. We've all had friends, right, that have gotten COVID. I have friends that have gotten COVID because they did a dinner or something they didn't need to, and and you feel awful afterwards, right? Not only do you, even if you don't get sick and end up in the hospital, you feel awful because you may have given it to other people. So it's frustrating. I think if anybody could see the kind of weekend we just had in the intensive care unit and the kind of week we're having right now, if anybody could actually see what the physicians and the nurses and the pharmacists and the administrators, if they could see what we're going through right now, there would be no hesitation to mask up and socially distance. I honestly think people are good people, and I really think there wouldn't be any hesitation. I think most of it comes from bad information, truly. It is very, very serious. It's very frustrating, and it's very scary.
I know that's a lot to take in, but we do have other news to show you about. These photos here, gorgeous pictures snapped by Eric Bonici. They're out in Riverside, and there's actually a contest now to name the nest. You can go to yqgeagles.com to vote, and if you stick around, I know we've had a lot of heavy stories, but Colette's got a rescue story about an eagle that you're gonna wanna check out. Joining us now for a live look at the weather is Colette Kennedy, but before we get there, we know how much you love animals, and many people who watch our show also have a fond spot. You connected with a man who reached out to us about an encounter with a bald eagle?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. And it doesn't have a very happy beginning. This is a bald eagle that was found at the side of the road, presumably had been hit by a car and left for dead. And it's about somebody who's got a big heart and is willing to go the extra miles or kilometers, in this case, to make a difference. So he took this eagle in and drove it. I just want to give you some perspective here from Havelock to Greater Napanee with his 8-year-old daughter, an hour-and-a-half drive there and back, to not knowing if it was going to survive, to see if it was going to make it and if he could do it and he help it for a second chance at its life.
Eagles have this this magic about them, but when you're right there, you realize that like magic is really real. I was at a site. I got a text message from a contractor we work with saying that he'd found this eagle on the side of the road. It was on its back, and so it just looked like a big clump laying there, kind of in the ditch. And so I got out of my truck and I thought for sure it was dead. It was like basically lifeless. You know, its eyes were closed, and I just looked really, really close at its chest, and you could just see the feathers, these little like gentle breaths. You could just see its chest kind of lift up. Yeah, so we made it to Sandy Pines, and the intake person was kind of like, you know, I don't think this eagle is gonna make it.
When an animal comes in that's that flat, we have to assume the worst. So we assumed, because he'd been found on the road, that he'd probably been clipped by a car and he might have a head injury. She put an intravenous into his leg, and we started running the medication in. I got bitten a couple of days ago when I was putting a pill in his mouth. I was very quick with my reflexes and got my finger out pretty quick, but how many people can say they were bitten by an eagle, eh?
All day Saturday, I was just like so sure that the eagle was not going to make it. And towards the end of the day, my sister sent me a message and she says, "Dave, have you looked at Sandy Pines' Facebook page?" And I was like, "No, what's going on?" And she's like, "Get off the phone and check it out."
Mr. Eagle has finally finished all his medications, so we're just going to put him outside and give him some exercise so that he can fly and regain his strength. That's exactly what we hoped for. He looked around, he quickly figured out where he was going to go, and he went to the highest point in the cage. So that was brilliant. I think he's going to be just fine. It takes a special person to be brave enough to go and pick it up in the first place, and then bring it all this way. No, that's pretty amazing. Without people like that out there bringing the animals into us, we couldn't do what we do.
All these perfect things just aligned to, you know, to get this eagle to Sandy Pines. It just warms my heart and makes me want to do better. Yeah, it's amazing.
Makes me want to do better. What more is there to do? That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing experience. I went to Sandy Pines. I was there and saw when the eagle was put out to see if he would fly there in the aviary, and that wingspan, so incredible, Chris. Like 6, 7, almost 2 meters, really.
Oh, beautiful to see from that first picture, and then to see that flying. It's great to share with us. Thanks, Ms. Colette.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and I have good news too in terms of an update. He's doing so well that today, this afternoon, they decided it was time for him to go, and they had Dave come back, pick him up, and take him back to where he was found, and he was released this afternoon and took a couple hops and flew away. So on his journey there. Wonderful. I love stories like that and people like that. I want to share with you now what's going on in terms of our weather, because I kind of like at least what's going on here. And we're going to be seeing our current temperatures, just above freezing, and we'll kind of be around this area through the overnight hours. But what's really going to be changing is that we've got a warm front that's moving in, and that's going to be pushing our daytime highs and overnight lows, just in general, our temperatures up for the next few days here. So see those winds in that direction. More important is where that arrow is. So it's more of a southwesterly than westerly that we're seeing, and that's going to help as this new air mass is moving in. So you can see clouds as well getting a little bit thicker associated with the warm front, and then there's kind of a trailing trough here too. too. So that's going to bring in a little bit of extra cloud cover. But through the overnight, a few flurries possible, more so from Sarnia over towards Chatham, Kent, and London. I think we'll stay drier, but socked in with the clouds through the overnight hours. However, we will begin to see some clearing. Watch the timeline here, okay? So I've stopped this into the afternoon. I know the sun, is setting around 4:40-ish, so it doesn't give us a lot of time with the sunshine, but we should get some clearing there into the later afternoon hours. So getting back into the sun, and look at how that trough still brings the cloud cover into the east of us, but for southwestern Ontario, we should be seeing that sun with that high pressure that noses through for Thursday, making it look pretty good. And I do want to show you what the temperatures then like through the overnight. You can see like temperatures generally where they are, even coming up a little bit, and then these are your daytime highs. So at this time of year, even those few extra degrees really do have an impact. So up to 8 degrees, Chatham, Kent, 7 degrees. With that sunshine, just a tiny bit cooler though on Thursday, 6. And then we do have a system that I'm going to be watching very carefully as we go into the weekend. As this next one comes in, it looks like any snow associated will stay to the north of us, and it's a rain event, so we get kind of a spike in temperatures. In fact, we may find ourselves going into the double digits here until that system passes through, and then it closes the door, Chris, and that's kind of the end of the milder air. But we're going to have a nice string over the next several days here. So that's another piece, I guess, of good news, except for those, I don't know, who want to ski or make snowmen.
Yeah, a little tough on that side, but I think we can forgive you for sharing what you did earlier there. That was something beautiful to watch, and I really appreciate you bringing it to us.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Colette. Now, coming up next, we have more stories of people helping people right here in Windsor, Essex during a very tough time. Young people are making a difference for seniors during the pandemic. Members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association are part of a national program called Helping Neighbors. They pick up groceries and medication for people who can't leave their homes. But now they've been collecting food for charities across the country.
As the pandemic hit, we all were like, we should all do our part for our communities. Obviously, this pandemic hit everybody differently. There were people that were more at risk, the elderly population, those who had, other sorts of medical conditions. They were obviously more at risk. There was this old lady that she was living in. She lives in an apartment building in Riverside, and she said, "You're an angel, you're an angel," and she's saying something like that. I'm like, I'm just dropping off some sanitizer, right? Like it's literally no big deal for her, but just being there at the right time for somebody can impact a lot.
Close to 700,000 pounds of food was collected and donated to various charities across Canada. We sent a letter to, in fact, all the charities across Canada. We said, if you food banks or charities, if you need any help, let us know. We provided a lot of volunteers to them as well. They reached out to us.
Now, if you'd like to volunteer or ask for assistance, just go online to helpingneighbors.com. Now, throughout this week, we'll be hearing from people who are helping others by giving back to the community during a very difficult time. If you want more information about how to make donations yourself, just go to our website, look for Sounds of the Season. You can find it at cbc.ca/Windsor. That's it for us here at CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for any of these stories, for more on them, go to our website. You can also find us on social media as well, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're going to leave you tonight with some more pictures of those eagles that were sent in to us. A beautiful way to end the day, and a reminder that there are some beautiful things still happening around us if you just take a pause, a moment to look up and enjoy what we've got. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.